We grew to about $500,000 in revenue over like 3 years, and we just gave all the money back to all of the users. Moved to SF, and then kind of just was waiting around in the darkness for a good 3 or 4 months, me and my co-founder. It's really that. I did not have it in me to put time into this and feel like my time was worthwhile anymore. I had convinced myself for long enough that it was worth my time, but I think it just finally became clear to me that I was lying to myself. And I think for the first time as a founder, I just had deep conviction on something very big because I finally just like believe something that not that many other people seem to believe. Like my co-founder pulled me aside one time and was like, dude, if you don't get me a fucking infrastructure engineer, we are going to die. And I was like, oh, I need to stop coding now. Got it. So it grew quite quickly from where it was. It started at like $200, $300 a month for that sales training to maybe 6 months later, we're at about 60K. MRR, all self-serve, all developers. We're not really signing any contracts, nothing like that.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the product market fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders and it lets us get better guests. Thank you.
Jordan, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. Was really excited to chat with you. Heard some other episodes, and yeah, I'm just honored to be here, honestly.
Well, I'm happy to have you here, man. You know, it's funny, like I think, especially during COVID, you know, there was a lot of talk about, you know, the death of the Bay Area and like it wasn't all that important anymore. And you know, your story is kind of like you're in Toronto building, I might say struggling for a few years. You move to the Bay Area, you know, maybe a year or so later, you launch a product. Year after that, you're 10 million in ARR, you visit 20 million Series A. So I don't know if the Bay Area is magical or not, but it certainly seems like it.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's more to do with moving. I think it was the biggest thing for us. Like I think we got stuck in a rut of like chasing a local maxima, working on what we worked on before, which is like a calendar app for 3-4 years. That moving was like the shock to the system that really did it. And if I'm going to move anywhere, might as well move to SF where, you know, gravity at least moves in the right direction.
So tell me the story. Like when do you start working on what became Vapi, and like what's the team that's doing it? Like give me that context.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll kind of start from just before the pivot. So that would have been maybe July of 2023. I think is when we decided, okay, this calendar app thing that we're doing, it was like a button for joining Mini super quick. We don't think that there's like a big generational company to build here. We grew to about $500,000 in revenue over like 3 years, and we just gave all the money back to all of the users, and then just kind of moved to SF, and then kind of just was waiting around in the darkness for a good 3 or 4 months, me and my co-founder, just trying to find a problem to solve. We even went down to like food banks and homeless shelters, just trying, as founders do, trying to find deep problems to solve. And we didn't find any there.
What? How did like? Tell me about that.
Yeah, sorry, that's super random to bring up, but
I
yeah,
like it.
we're just like,
what?
Okay, well, we need a really, really, really difficult problem to solve. So we're like, oh, obviously, world hunger and homelessness. Let's just like go look at that. And we thought maybe there's something we could do there. Turns out it's a lot harder than what 2 tech bros can kind of come up with on their laptops. So we kept pivoting around. I started to get personally,
you know, just on that, I'll just go on tangent on that because it's actually interesting. You know, one of the things, it's this weird balance because on the one hand, you want to solve like an important problem. And if you look at like getting a list of the most important problems in the world is actually not that hard. You know what I mean? Like, you know, climate change is one, obviously poverty is another, education is another. Like there are massive problems affecting like hundreds of millions, in some cases, billions of people. But there's this other concept in economics called willingness to pay, which might as well be called ability to pay. And you kind of need, you know, you need both to kind of come in because you know, you can solve big problems. You can try to solve big problems, but if there's no ability or willingness to pay, you're not going to get the value or the value capture, and you're not going to get a business out of it. So there's a kind of a Venn diagram, I guess, there that, but it's interesting. Like a lot of times, first-time founders especially will either go to very niche, tiny little problems that are not that interesting, and maybe then they'll be like, this is so interesting, go all the way to kind of world hunger, kind of like you did. Hopefully find that middle ground, but it's not uncommon.
Yeah, I think like the ambition was there. We were like, oh, we just need to do something like super hard. I just think you're right. I think there's a bit of an overcorrection where like, oh, why don't we just like solve the hardest fucking thing? Because we threw everything else out, so might as well try. But I think what also needs to be there is like some level of like passion or determination for the problem. I think Michael Seibel, he was one of our group partners at YC. He told us quite early on, I'm skeptical that you guys are going to continue doing what you're doing for more than 3 months if it isn't working after 3 months. And he was right every single time. And every 3 months we would pivot. And so I think it does take some sort of like personal connection to a problem, or at least some like long-term conviction, just to hang in there long enough to see it through to something that's meaningful. And with the calendar app, we didn't really have any kind of long-term vision for the product. We were just like, okay, well, they want calendar links, we'll put calendar links in there. They want scheduling, we'll do scheduling. They want emails, we'll do emails. But there wasn't any like long-term thinking. So of course we were never going to achieve something big long-term. It was just like, yeah, greedy algorithm.
How'd you even get into the like calendar app? What was that, 2020 or whatever when you started? Like, how do you even get into that?
We were just pivoting around looking for an idea, and then we built this like button to join meetings really quickly, and it had like 90% retention, and it just like started growing, and people just loved it. They were like, oh, I can join meetings fast now. Great. But it was like a very simple, tiny little
feature.
Problem,
Right.
Yeah, but it was very high retention. So we're like, let's grasp onto this retention that we have, and I'll just build a bunch of other stuff around it. And that ended up turning into an AI note taker on its later evolutions, where it's like, oh, well, they join meetings really with high retention. Why not just like now just give them notes, and now there's more value with high retention. But I don't think it kind of worked. $500,000 in revenue is something, but it's not enough to build like something generational or a grander vision than notes. I think we came to realize, yeah, people don't like notes.
Give me some depth on the decision to throw that out and move, because that's obviously a pivotal moment. And I think many founders are in that. Like, if it doesn't work at all, it's easy. If it's crushing like you are right now, it's not that it's easy, but it's like easy to know what to do. If you're in that gray, that's where you
dangerous.
Can get stuck. So dangerous.
Yeah, it sucks. Yeah.
Walk me through that.
I hear it all the time, like, because I posted about this story publicly on LinkedIn, and so I get a lot of founders reaching out to me like, how do I know if I should pivot or not pivot? At the end of the day, it just came down to something simple. I just did not have the will to continue. It's really that. I did not have it in me to put time into this and feel like my time was worthwhile anymore. I had convinced myself for long enough that it was worth my time, but I think it just finally became clear to me that I was lying to myself. And that realization came from like, I think it was like a conversation with our advisor, Michael Seibel, where he's just like, guys, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you don't care. You're working 95. Like, what are you doing with your lives? And I was like, fuck, yeah, right. Like, I have kind of not pissed away a large, a number of years, but like, these are like the best ones. Shouldn't I be trying to do the craziest thing? And I'm just not. And so of course I'm not going to achieve crazy things. And so, yeah, after that, I think we had a bit of decision paralysis after we pivoted for those 3 months. We were like, well, it has to be really big. So, okay, this isn't really big, or this idea, the other idea we have about whatever isn't very big. And so we just didn't really pick anything for a little while. And we were scared, I think, after burning ourselves. But that kind of led into me building, I was just grasping for ideas. I didn't know what to do. And so I built like this AI therapist bot to go on walks with for like a couple hours of the day. And so I would like call it and chat about like my startup problems and all my ideas. I would help like put it all together into like something. And I would just like keep going on walks with it every day, keep building it, keep going on walks every day. That's kind of
how'd you come up with this in the first place?
I think I tried Pi or Siri or like one of these personal AI coaches. And I was just trying to talk to it. I was like, I don't want to fucking like chat with this thing. I hate typing. Like, I just want to like walk and think and have a fluid conversation with something. So I'm like, it must exist. And then I looked around and it was like, wow, it literally exists nowhere. There is nothing, at least pre like 4.0 audio. This is like before we had audio models. There literally was nothing that allows you to have like a fluid conversation. And I was frustrated with that.
And so what happens after you build it?
I walk every day. And I build every day, and I notice it's too slow. And then I notice it sounds too robotic, and I notice it decides to go on like long tangents and has to finish a complete essay of content before I can like speak again. And I'm like, fuck. And it's just like so annoying. At the end of the call, or sometimes the call just drops, and like I lose the context of this like 20 minutes I've been investing in this like AI conversation, and it's just like fuck. And so all of these issues just like kept compounding. I just kept like building stuff into this like therapy service that I was, kind of building. And I was like, oh, maybe there's a platform here. Like maybe I can now get us to other people. We found one guy who was like a friend of mine, Mo. He's also an angel investor in our company. And he was like, this is the best thing ever. I called the AI, it's called Harmon. I call Harmon like 12 times a day. I'm like,
Wow.
whoa, okay. We have product market fit with one person. I think that was a bit more of a fluke, but maybe there is something to build there. Maybe it's just validating that like voice is important, but I don't think it's validating that my like thought buddy is valuable to people. I don't know how much you would have like actually paid for that. And I couldn't replicate that again, even though I looked. And so back to pivot hell for a little while once again, but luckily I have my AI therapy buddy to help me through it. And I had spent a lot of time wrangling with these audio models to get it to the point where it was. And it was like actually like pretty good for what? I have no idea, but it was pretty good and it felt fluid. And so when I stumbled on, I think it was Hyperbound, they were a YC startup, like two guys, Atul and Tree, and they were just building this like AI sales role play coach for their like YC startup. They had no revenue. They had just pivoted from like an email client or something. And I talked to them and they were struggling with the exact same thing that I had built, which is like the whole speech-to-speech interaction piece and chaining these models and making it work reliably. And I was like, okay, why don't you just like use my thing? I'll rip off the therapy thing. It's not Harmon anymore. It's voice AI platform X, and I'll give you an endpoint to hit and it'll set up like a WebSocket connection and audio will stream in and out. Cool. And that was the first time I had a customer. And I was like, I'll charge you, let's say like 5 cents a minute. Sure. And I'll pass on the model cost at cost because I have no idea what you're going to spend. And so that actually pricing model actually ended up being, the same pricing model we have today. But they ended up, after iterating for a few months, actually closing a deal with a sales team to do sales role play coaching. And I was like, okay, interesting. There was like a value here. Looked around, found some other startups doing the same thing. And then we were working with like 8 different kind of YC or like not YC kind of startups in the space for the few months following that first customer launching. So that's kind of the inception part.
And like what year is this? Like when exactly is this?
This is maybe October of 2023. So it's a few months after that pivot and move in July.
Okay. It's a year after kind of ChatGPT comes out.
I think so. I think
what's happening in the voice, like, because today there's so many voice like apps, wherever. What's happening in like the voice AI world at that point?
Nothing. Like everything is like in disparate. Feel like you have transcription models that are doing transcription, large language models that are doing like what they do. Text-to-speech models are doing what they do. Nobody's really taken the time to put them together yet. And anyone who's tried has just like faced the same issues that I face and then like solved on my own. Nobody was really thinking about even like speech-to-speech models, which is now like a super popular thing that tons of researchers are spending time on. They did not exist. There was not a single like speech-to-speech model in existence at the time. And there was no research that was far along, anything like that. I actually tried, spinning one up and finding them myself so I could host them, so I could solve my problem. But they didn't exist. So I had to build the best proxy I could, which is chaining the best in class pieces that were all over the place. But the pieces themselves, they were kind of slow. They were clunky. They weren't optimized for real time by any means. So I had to like fight with like Deepgram's support. People like, please, real time super important. I need your models to be faster. Please improve your streaming API. And it wasn't really that much of a priority for them at the time. Same thing with 11 Labs. I was like, dude, like the WebSocket streaming, I need it faster. And they just like, real time wasn't as much of a thing.
Walk me through maybe the stack. Like where is Vapi? Like there's so many different players that are part of that, right? Like, yeah, where does Vapi come in? Like maybe just today. Let's start there. Then we can go kind of from there.
Sure. Yeah. The way to think about us is like we're everything in between all these disparate pieces and like talking to a real voice agent on the phone that's integrated with your data and then scales to like millions of calls. So we are like I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. I would say maybe something like Stripe-esque, where it's like we kind of wrap together all of these, complicated like banking APIs, et cetera, into something that's like unified, but still like super configurable and easy for developers and obviously works reliably at scale. So that's kind of what we've done for voice and all of these different model providers that exist. So now there's like hundreds of models and different providers on our platform that users can like pick and choose between as if they're kind of building it themselves. So they kind of have a similar experience like what I was doing, building my AI therapist back in the early days, where they're not sacrificing like configuration or control, but they still have like the ease of use and speed to deployment. So that's really like our value is just speed to deployment and then testing and then like iteration and like that whole dev loop of improving your agents over time.
Maybe like a way to think about it in simple terms, like take 11 Labs is probably the most famous out of the ones like you mentioned. Where do they stop and where do you start? Like if I'm building a voice app, like and I just want to build on top of 11 Labs versus using you, kind of what's the difference?
My answer would be different to like a year ago versus now. A year or two ago, they were just a text-to-speech API. And so you could use them, like you present text and then they would send you back audio. And it's like, okay, great. But you can't have a conversation where you're texting it and then it's speaking back, right? And so you need to actually like build like an orchestration system that in real time knows like, okay, you're done speaking now, time now to hit their API, get the result. Oh, you started speaking again? Okay, cut that off. And now let's generate the next statement the next time you're done. Like that kind of like real time orchestration is kind of what we did on top. Now they have like a separate voice agent like platform that they've started to release, but it's a bit more abstracted. Whereas we're much more like low level. We expose all the raw pieces so developers can like build like entire products on top of it.
Got it. And then let's go back in time now. Then, so you're doing this. How because that's like voice has changed a lot, like in a short amount of time. How well did things work early on? And I'm trying to get a sense of promise versus reality, for those first early kind of customers.
Yeah, I think there was some very early hype. There was this one player called ARR at the time. And they were the first ones who ever were able to like build a business doing like AI phone calls. But they did fall into the trap of like over-promising to users like what the capability of the technology at the time. Because the only models that could run at real-time speed, like we're talking like under 2 seconds of, to response time, were like GPT 3.5 or like really shitty text-to-speech models. And so they were usually like sounded cool in demos, but they weren't intelligent enough to actually like reliably perform the business objective. Like it would like skip steps in a flow or reveal information to a user before it's supposed to, or allow them to book an appointment for an invalid date. Like those sort of things that make it so that, you can't actually like move the needle on business metrics like reliably. And so we would see like 70% hallucination rates with like 3.5 at the time. And so we just had to push on over probably a 6-month period, like latency was our entire company, but it was just me and my co-founder. but that was our focus, was just like, how can we find ways to squeeze more milliseconds out of this whole like pipeline? We tried everything. Like we even started like balancing requests amongst like different regions of like Azure OpenAI, so that at any one moment when you finish your statement, we already know the fastest deployment to send it to and ping it to like East US or ping it to West US and like these little optimizations over time all added up to something that got closer and closer, shaving it to the point where it finally felt kind of real. And and of course, like there were tailwinds as well. Like the models started to get faster. The companies like DeepGram, 11 Labs, et cetera, started focusing a lot more on real-time, smaller models. And so every maybe 3 or 4 months, we would see like a 20% improvement in latency or something like that. Of course, gains like that nowadays are come much less frequently, but at the time it was like, oh shit, there's a new model. This is awesome. And it was like a step change improvement in our product. And so, we did our best with what we could do, but we were still beholden to the just general progress of tech at the time.
Did it feel inevitable at the time? Because like you think about something like voice, when you have text, I mean, it feels like, kind of obvious. Like obviously people are going to want to build voice apps. I mean, it does now. I'm just wondering how much of that is hindsight 2020 versus at that time looking forward? Did it feel like for sure there's going to be voice apps? Is it going to be us or is it going to be somebody else that powers them?
I mean, this is what was different from what we did with our last startup versus this startup. This startup, it was like, or this iteration. This time we were like, okay, shit. If these models start getting closer and closer to human performance in this trend that we're seeing, this whole latency, cost, and performance kind of trends continue where they're going, obviously we will hit human performance in like a year and a half. Like it is absolutely inevitable that this will come. And I think for the first time as a founder, I just had deep conviction on something very big. I think that is what made it so I could continue working on this with it not working for more than 3 months. Because I finally just like believe something that not that many other people seem to believe,
Well, walk me through that. Actually, that's a critical piece. So at that point, many people didn't think this was as inevitable as you thought it would be.
No, I don't think anyone was focused on voice at all. Like maybe 11 Labs was like still doing text to speech, but nobody was thinking about like voice agents like as a thing.
Man, it's crazy how fast things change. Like it's just
Yeah,
ridiculous.
dude. And it was literally what like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like everyone just so focused on text and like what was going on with LLMs that no one realized that, oh, of course, like other mediums are going to be way more human and popular than the text medium. And so, yeah, I think that early conviction made me know like vaguely, I know there's going to be this big shift that's coming. But what I didn't know is like exactly what I would need to build to like capitalize on that shift when it came. We actually thought for the longest time that what we were building was like the proxy to eventually becoming like the voice model company. Like we thought we were going to raise $500 million. We're naive. We're going to raise $500 million and we're going to train like the master speech-to-speech model. I talked to everybody else. Nobody else was thinking about speech-to-speech models, at least publicly. And OpenAI, I'm sure, was thinking about it a long time ago. But we thought that we were going to be an ML company and invest in that. But what we're going to do for now is chain together these models and raise money and get there eventually. But obviously, that didn't end up going the way that we thought. But we directionally placed a bet that roughly we don't know how voice is going to come out in the world, but we do know that developers are going to want to build stuff to get it out into the world in ways that we just don't know yet. That was like a pretty clear bet at the time. So what we had conviction on, we bet on, and even if it was like less than the full picture.
Walk me through then kind of those iterations, like first quarter, second quarter, or months. I mean, I guess it was only 12 months, so there's only so much, but like, what you built at first and then who built on top and what some of those step functions were, not just in terms of the models getting better, which I think everybody understands, but more in terms of maybe the customer use cases or the unlocks in terms of the what you enabled, you know what I mean, for your end customers over time.
Yeah, I mean, at the start, it was like very experimental stuff. Like it was really that one like sales role play use case, role play training use case. That was like the number one contributor to our volume. If I look at the chart, I have it in front of me. Like October 2023, November 2023, December 2023. It's mostly just like that one company plus like random folks trickling in from like hearing about us on TikTok or like whatever. Like no like serious use cases. We did have some like random like tiny unfunded startups also building like AI interviewer for like product management interviews, or this random company in Sweden that is building this tech to help ski resorts like accept inbound calls. Right. And so it's all over the place.
So niche. Yeah.
Yeah. It was super random. But like this was representative of like the pie of companies that were thinking about building voice at the time. And then if I fast forward, maybe in like February, March-ish, we start to see a lot of growth. So I have it in front of me. So in like January 2024, we had like 32,000 calls on the platform. If I even zoom back further than that, and that's all just sales role play training, basically.
Wow. So that business that you partnered with was doing really well. I would have to assume.
Yeah, they did decently well. They had like 32K calls. Then we started to get some other folks like trickling in, and we kind of hit like 52K calls. We're looking at February. March was like 164,000 calls. We launched on product. So that was the first time like we ever launched publicly. And so immediately we just like tripled our volume.
Tell me about that actually. Everything around kind of like planning for it, the launch on Product Hunt, what it did, what it felt like.
Yeah, the Product Hunt launch was, it was later than it should have been. I think we should have launched earlier and got more customers earlier, honestly, just to get more feedback. But I think we were just waiting to like finish like, oh, it needs to work on websites too. And it needs to work on not just Twilio phone numbers, but Vonage phone numbers. And it needs to have all this. So we kind of got in our heads about it needing to be bigger and bigger. But we did launch it once we thought it was ready. And biggest thing that we did was just like we posted a tweet and just got a ton of famous people we knew to retweet it. Or sorry, not new, but knew of well enough to beg them. And then we just had a cool video that some guy in our Discord reached out and was like, can I make a video for you for free? We were like, oh, sick. Yeah, come over. And he did. He made an awesome video for us. And then we just got a bunch of friends with followings to retweet it. And that was literally just what started it.
And so Product Hunt basically 4x, like at 4x your call volume?
Yeah, I'm looking here, like 50. No, I'd say 3x the call volume. Yeah, 165 that month of March. But honestly, like you would have expected after that there to be a big spike and then a dip or something. But for the most part, it just like continued growing, but like kind of at a slow pace. Like April that year, 279, then 464,
That's not that slow, man. That's like a double every month. I don't know
Yeah,
if I call it
I
slow
guess I
pace.
guess it was doubling every month. At the time, it didn't feel like super fast growth.
Really? Okay.
No, not at all. Because even though these numbers are, trying to think of how to explain it, it was still just not that many people, right? And so it wasn't that noisy. And then I think maybe mid-year, we just started like opening tons of Slack channels with like everyone that was using our platform. We had maybe like 300-400 Slack channels. And then it got noisy. Then like we just had like tons of people hounding us for support all the time, varying levels of technical ability.
How many people are on the team at this point?
Me and Nikhil.
Oh wow. Okay.
I think maybe we hired like a couple guys out of Discord. That's like Sahil and Shubham. Like they were in our Discord. We just kind of like brought them on board, but that was it.
And what's that generate, like that 500,000 call volume in whatever that was, June or whatever? Like what's that generating in ARR?
So it would have been on average maybe like 12 cents a minute. So you're looking at 500,000. You're about 60K in MRR.
Okay.
Yeah. So it grew quite quickly from where it was. It started at like $200, $300 a month for that sales training to maybe 6 months later, we're at about 60K in MRR. All self-serve, all developers. We're not really signing any contracts, nothing like that.
What do you feel from a pull perspective versus what you felt originally with that button for the calendar app?
Completely different. The more that, so once we did end up opening all those Slack channels with our users, we were like, holy shit, there's an infinite amount of stuff to do. And everyone is like super noisy all the time, to the point where like we actually had to shut down all of our Slack channels. We had to close them with all of our customers just because like we could not focus on what was important. And actually it had this like weird like a rebound effect where like you think it would hurt our brand or something, but people were like, wow, these guys are doing so well that they close all of their Slack channels with their customers. And so it got around that we were doing better. It was like, what? But that is why we were just way too busy.
I'm going to ask you for a small favor, a tiny little favor. In fact, it's not even, now that I think about it, it's not even really a favor for me. I'm actually trying to help you do a favor for you. Just hit the follow button. You won't miss out on the next episode. You'll see everything that we release. If you don't want to listen to an episode, you just skip it, but at least you don't miss out.
And in a sense, I mean, I would argue like I've seen this now a few times. Like obviously the first version of products are never, great, but and you don't want people to be complaining. That's not like a positive thing. And yet it's kind of a signal of a positive thing, because like if people are shouting at you to fix this, to add that, whatever, it signals that the thing you've built is something they're actually relying on, right? Like if they don't really care that you don't have that new feature, then it's okay. Their life is going. If you're like the reason they can't grow, the reason they can't do whatever they need to do, that's value to you. That's how important you are.
And this is like, I think the key part. If I think like I kind of glossed over the part where like we went from things not working to things working. What was very, very different this time is we had a lot of like, I guess, relatively low value users that had a 10 out of 10 pain. Like if we did not find a way to add auth tokens to API calls for tool calls, their business would not exist. Like it was just like existential for everybody. And so constantly everything was P0 all the time. We had an outage, like even if we only had like 8 users, they were all pissed. Like usually if you have an outage and you have 8 users, like nobody notices.
Yeah, that's right. I don't hear about it.
Where it's like, oh no, like their customers, like the customers that they have are pissed at them because they didn't get their calls answered. And so they lost money. And so then they got mad at us, of course, like rightfully so. And so we were constantly just facing all these like reliability issues. And anytime we would want to move fast and push a change, it would break something, and then a customer would get pissed. And so it was this constant balancing act of like just trying to push forward on what we thought was important, but for the most part, just listening to what people wanted and just doing it like immediately. If people would ask me for stuff, and like within 10 minutes, I would have it up, like a new API param or something like that.
How much easier is everything once you have that like burning need kind of driving you?
It's not easier. Like it's harder. There's a difference between like the feeling of uncertainty and that being easy or hard, and like actually the work being easy or hard, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like it went from things are hard because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing to like things are hard because there's just so much to fucking do all the time. But also in the back of your head, you're like, okay, but is this customer like representative of the future customer? And like, I don't know if this is important to do. So then there's also this like little game you're playing, but it's at least better than like sniffing around like food, like of like food. What do you call it? Like soup kitchens and stuff, trying to find a problem.
Trying to find problems. Yeah. Well, I guess what happens is at least you get clarity. Like obviously there's always questions and uncertainty, but you do get a lot of clarity from that the market yelling at you to like, dude, do this, fix this, whatever. You're like, okay, I got to get these things done versus where you're trying to like find that pull. You know what I mean? Like you're like, I wonder if this next thing I'm building is going to be the thing that tips us over. And you're just constantly in this motion of building and hoping versus building and knowing that you're solving somebody's problem because of this thing you built, because they were yelling at you to build it in the first place.
Yes, but if I zoom back to that time in April-ish, 2024, when things started to pick up, OpenAI also announced GPT-4o audio. And remember, at that time, we thought we were going to be a model company that was going to be the one to build this. And so me and actually, now I remember correctly, I think we had like 6 people maybe on the team in total. We kind of looked at each other and were like, oh, fuck, like, well, that was our whole like vision and everything. Like, what do we do now? But it kept growing. We were just sort of like disheartened for like a moment. And we were like, maybe this is it. And we talked to an investor of ours and like, yeah, just, pack it up. Like, it's fine. Like, whatever. Like, it happens all the time. And so we had a moment where we were like, I don't know. It was like one day of a moment. And they were like, let's just keep going. Let's just kind of see what happens. Who knows? We just kept pushing, kept doing what we were doing, and it just kept growing every week, like 10%, 20%. And we were like, I guess GPT-4o just like grew everyone's awareness that voice was important. It didn't really like displace us by any means. It just made it more popular. And so then after that, like everything just started to grow extremely quickly, but we still had this feeling inside that was like, fuck, OpenAI is just going to kill us, or like something is just going to come and kill us because we're just like a wrapper. And then eventually I met a sales advisor. His name's Mitch Mirando. He's awesome. And he was like, look, guys, enterprises, they can't use OpenAI. It's just like not physically possible. It's just like way too fucking complicated. There's like constant like refining and tuning and like expertise that you guys are building in your team that these enterprises just don't have and would rather pay to have than build it themselves. Both from like a infrastructure and like model knowledge and like all this other stuff that we've been building as a team this whole time. And he was like, long term, that is your defensibility against all these big guys, is going into enterprise and solving that like last mile schlep of actually getting all these voice agents to production with all of the complexity that you've seen so far serving all these tiny startups. And so that gave us enough conviction that like, okay, actually, like green light, we're fine. Let's just keep growing our self-serve motion and keep growing its like defensibility by making it more and more complex and featureful, and start building out an enterprise motion that's defensible, just because we get locked in with these very large and slow moving enterprises that have no way of accessing this technology without a partner. And that was maybe like June of last year, or June of 2024, when we signed our first enterprise customer, and we saw this happen, and it kind of worked.
Yeah, let's dive in on that, because like this is something, at least for me, I've been thinking about a lot, which is where can startups play relative to the big guys? And OpenAI being obviously one of them, but you mentioned enterprise, like Cohere is still, $5 billion player that's like focusing just on enterprise. And then in voice, you've got like 11 labs. How do you think about that? Like, for example, take this enterprise thing, maybe we double click on that. Like, how long does that last? Is it until OpenAI or like Cohere does more voice stuff, or OpenAI does more enterprise stuff, or 11 labs goes further into that last mile? Or is there a reason to believe that you're always going to have like that last mile space for you?
I think as time has gone on, we've seen competition come from every angle. We've seen, Twilio working on stuff, and 11 Labs working on stuff, and I'm sure Google and Amazon are going to work on some very large enterprise-facing versions of what we have. But I think what we have built slowly over time, working with that like first engineer who needed like a voice agent, to the startups, to the enterprises that we gain experience with, is that experience that we gain working with them is actually very valuable and hard to, actually physically impossible to shortcut. Like every single parameter in our API is from like us like hearing from a developer, figuring out like the core pain that they have and shipping it and like seeing how they did, and then tuning it again and trying again with a bunch of other developers. And so like our product is a representation of everything that we have learned so far. And so to think that, okay, maybe they're just going to copy our entire API as the solution, that's a lot of shit to build, especially for a really large company. like the surface area of our platform is like enormous. So that's tricky. And then when it comes to actually working with enterprise customers, just internally, we have a lot of expertise that we have documented about specifically for like prior authorization calls. We know the best way to tune a voice agent using our platform to make it so that it can navigate the IVR tree effectively, right? Like that expertise is very hard to learn without having done it yourself many times.
Let me ask you another question. Are you fearful or excited by the new OpenAI model releases? Like OpenAI is about to release a model tomorrow. Do you feel like, holy shit, what are they going to do now? Or are you like, yes, hopefully this is like a 10x improvement?
I feel like 80% excited, 20% scared because I'm always paranoid. Yeah, I think 80% is like, oh, fuck yeah. Like we finally have like OpenAI real time and it's ready for our customers to like choose to use on our platform. It's in there. Great. It also means that we have more explaining to do when a customer comes to us and is like, why can't we just use real time? And we're like, okay, here's 10 other customers that we saw try. Here's everything that they ran into trying to. Here's everything you're not thinking about, et cetera, et cetera. Where it does, as there's more awareness that voice is a thing, there is more simplifying of the problem that we need to like educate the market on. So that is one thing. And the other thing is like, yes, I do sometimes have like an existential like, oh fuck, like what if tomorrow there's like a new voice agent SDK and the infrastructure has like telephony integrations and they think about HIPAA compliance, and I don't think it's possible. But I do always like to be a little scared.
I think you have to be paranoid as a founder. So that goes for like way beyond AI. Like that's for everything. But I asked that question because that's become my go-to question when I think about like investing in a new AI company is, given the positioning of this company, would they be, because you used to have like, like PDF summarizers as, like a GPT wrapper, right? And then obviously that company is going to only be fearful of the next OpenAI announcement because they're like, well, if they could just do, input a PDF, you're dead. And that goes like many different things. And, that doesn't mean you can't build like, think Perplexity, like, but I think Perplexity is probably scared of OpenAI. Like now they got search, like what is even the difference today between them two? And it kind of starts to like, wedge and you kind of can't tell them apart. And that's only value to the bigger player, but they built a pretty big business already. But I guess my point is like, that's become my big question. And that's what I tell founders to think about is like, whatever positioning you're taking, think to yourself how you feel about whether it's OpenAI or pick your other big model. Like, how do you feel about them? If them launching a new model makes your product better and you deliver more value, that's good. If it makes you scared and withers like how much value you're actually creating for end customer, that's not a great place to be because you can only assume those models are only going to get better over time.
I think where I thought the only place that I can be safe, or I still do believe the only place that we can be safe is kind of covering that last mile. Because I feel like that's the trickiest part for a super, super large company to tackle. Last mile to enterprise, last mile to actually developer getting live, and like for the end use case. And then lastly, my assumption is there's enough meat there in that gap between models and production that something defensible can be built. And so that's why we do what we do.
So walk me through the second half of last year. So you went from what, 60K MRR to like 1 million MRR in those 6 months. Is that right?
I can do the math super quick.
That's wild.
Let me take a look. April 279, 464. July was 692. July was 1.1. Sorry. August was 1.7, 2.1, like 2.6. Yeah, and so it just kind of kept going, man. And
that's call volume, right? Those numbers.
That's call volume. So if I map that to revenue, within 6 months we were at about like 4 million in revenue annually recurring. So like very small section of it was enterprise. Now that's larger, but most of it was just like self-serve organic. We did 0 ads. We did 0 like marketing. We didn't have the capacity for marketing. We just had like this Discord community and like maybe some people make YouTube videos about us. That's basically it.
What does it feel like to grow that fast internally?
You kind of take it for granted. Honestly, it's like you have like a 4% week growth and you're like, oh wow, we're really, really losing this week. Like it's like, you kind of just like, it just becomes your baseline. 10% becomes your baseline. And so it's very normal. The only difference in how it feels is like more stuff is breaking more often.
That was my question. Like that's the other side of my question is like, does it feel like there's fires burning like all over the place?
It constantly felt like that. Like my co-founder pulled me aside one time and was like, dude, if you don't get me a fucking infrastructure engineer, we are going to die. And I was like, oh, I need to stop coding now. Got it. And so, yeah, like it's just pure necessity. everything with that kind of growth.
How many people, like, so you were 2 people at the beginning of 24. How many people at the end of 24 and last year?
At the end of 24, I think we finished with maybe 14 or so. And now we're at
14 people and like 4 or 5 million ARR.
by then it would have been higher. This is where
Okay.
I need to get a bit fuzzy with numbers, unfortunately. But today we're now like 26 people.
Okay.
In March. Yeah.
And then, one of the things I think one of the most, the pivotal moment is landing on this problem set. I don't know how much time you had to think, but like, what advice would you have for founders that are looking for these kinds of like I think that's the key thing. Like when I think about, I've done like over 100 interviews now on people who found product market fit, and consistently, and frankly, even within these companies, most of which are successful, there's still gradients of the level of true need that their product, really solves. But I feel like that's still the biggest thing. Like if you can land on a must-solve problem, then everything, and that was my question, again, easier might be the wrong word, but certainly gets like clear. Like every next step just gets clearer and clearer, and you have this crazy velocity. So what's your, like, but then you could look at your story and be like, he got lucky. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he moved, played around. It happened to be, 22, 23, happened to land on this voice thing and it took off. You know what I mean? Like, what's your thinking around that? And what's your advice to founders that are looking for these kind of must-solve problems?
A few things. I think it's quite important that you just find someone who has a 10 out of 10 burning pain. When I say 10 out of 10, I mean like literally ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how painful is this? Like I know it sounds like a silly question, but just like ask them, because then you'll hear 6 and you're like, wait, what? It's like very important that people actually believe that they have it, and then get them to convince it to you. Like a 10 out of 10, like, is it really 10 out of 10? Like, isn't like this other thing you're talking about 10 out of 10? Like, why this specifically? And then they'll be like, oh, actually it's 8. And you're like, okay, now we know. Right. And so it's about like pushing on that and getting them to prove to you that it's as painful as it is, because like you deserve to know before you fucking spend like 4 months building on something that, might not solve that hard of a problem. And so what we did is we found a 10 out of 10 pain for this one specific AI sales role play training company where it was existential that they figured it out or their company would die. We just so happened to be in a place where lots of other people were going to start having that problem too. I would have been slightly more intelligent at the time, which I kind of became like a couple months later as I saw the growth. I would think, okay, latency is improving, cost is improving, performance is improving. Like QED, there's going to be a lot more stuff that people want to build with voice in 18 months. I think if you can just have like a high level conviction on where the world will be, like realistically, you can at least directionally point yourself in the right, like following gravity, right?
But to be clear, only after having found that 10 out of 10 problem, right? Or
I don't know if there's an order that's good or bad. Maybe
just
the other way
because
around.
the other way around, you can really, I mean, there are proven founders who know spaces so deeply that it's fine. But I'm gonna argue that for 95% plus of founders, the other way can lead you astray very often, because it's very easy to convince yourself the world's gonna go a certain way, and you're like, well, in the future it's gonna be like this that you build, and in the meantime, nobody's got a 10 out of 10 problem, so you got no buyers.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
yes,
The other
that's
way.
true. Like, I think it's fine to start with a hypothesis, but just like very quickly after, you need to find the person who has the pain to prove that it's worth pursuing. Like one way or the other, right? Like
because I
need
think
to be
it's one
motivated
thing to
go
have
talk.
a handful of 10 out of 10 problem and think there's going to be more of these in the future. That's fine. What's scary is to say people will have a 10 out of 10 problem, they just don't yet, and then it's like, okay,
Yes.
that's
No.
challenging.
You're You need to find at least like one person,
That's right.
and that's a realistic path to 2.
But having, the other question I have is having been in these kind of two worlds, right, of like not 10 out of 10 and now 10 out of 10, what would, like, let's say, because what I go back to a point I made earlier, like there are a lot of founders that if they're honest with themselves, they're doing sub $1 million, maybe they're doing $1 million or $2 million in ARR, maybe they're doing 100K, right, but somewhere around there. And if they're honest with themselves, they would kind of realize that they're not really solving a true like 10 out of 10 problem. What's your advice to them?
Oh man, at $1 million, that's so tough. At 100,000, it's a bit easier. At $1 million, like there's a lot of investment. You got a full team behind you. Like that's a tough call.
But at 100, let's say at 500K, at 100K.
Actually, yeah. At the earlier stages, one, it's okay to throw everything out if you have to, but you also have like earned exposure to like $100,000 worth of like value. And so you should probably talk to those people and like find out what else you could do that in their daily lives that is like, what are like the top 5 pains in your life? Like, what are they? And they'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're at 5. And it's like, well, why didn't you get me solving 1?
That's right.
You know? And then like there's ways to expand and kind of work with those users to then pivot to something that's higher value. But I think what's important in that situation where you have revenue is like you need to find a way to build conviction. Otherwise, you will just continue doing what you're doing. And so that's why you need to be talking to customers, running experiments, and being willing to let that thing go if the data pushes you in that direction.
And I have specific examples of people on the show that did exactly, like one that comes to mind is a company called Noibu was doing something in e-commerce for 2 years. They're 3K MRR, and they ended up very similar to you saying, screw this, I'm not going another day. Some catalyst happened, doesn't really matter. And then they went back to everyone, like asked for the real problems. And they got a list of real problems. They took the first one, they found a way to solve it. 2 years after that, they're doing 300K MRR, right? And like a very simple story, but it happens more often than you think. And you really can ask customers, your ICP, what is the biggest problem for them? And they'll have an answer.
Yeah, definitely. For the one where you're already at $1 million, that's tough. That's like that. I mean, we threw away 500K, right? So I somehow, and that was like a big life decision for me. Like it wasn't easy to do that. But we kind of just put the business on like autopilot for like a couple months and just like went exploring. I did say we gave the money back. We actually gave it back like 4 months later. Like we took some time to like hedge a little bit. That made it easier.
When you moved, like what kind of personal runway did you have?
Oh, we could have kept going. We were like break even at that time. Yeah.
Oh, you had because you had your existing business or what? You would have kept. You were breaking even on that. I see.
Yeah. So we were already default alive. We spent $1 million over like 3 years. Like we were super slim, and so we could just keep going.
So you didn't, right? It's not like you shut it down, went to zero, and then had a personal runway. You moved and then had this thing break even, and then when you figured it out, you kind of cut it out.
Yeah, but what was most important is like we just had to completely shut off all thinking about the past product, like 100%.
You maintained.
Yeah, we had like any support emails that came in, it was just like, here's a refund. Like we didn't exactly. We didn't. We spent zero time on it, and so we just needed to make that mental space to like make an informed call. But I think we were quite certain, like we were also just burnt out on it. So I don't think we could have continued doing the calendar thing, even if we wanted to.
I mean, I think you mentioned some, but like any that come to mind, like any points where you thought you're just going to fail, like this was just not going to work. You're just going to quit and maybe go get a job.
Yeah. During those 3 months, like there were a couple times when Nikhil almost like ran off. Like my co-founder was like, oh, we should go to India or like, and help those kids. That's my end goal anyways. Might as well do it now. Or almost ran off to like join a crypto gang, helping tribes in Africa like trade. And it's just like, yeah, it got really weird for a sec. And so I just felt the need to just like grasp at straws and just like make something. And so that thing was the AI therapist that kind of started all that.
By the way, I guess we didn't touch on this. What did you do before Vapi? Like what was in your co-founder?
Before Vapi or before like the superpowered, like the AI note taker?
Before before your original product. That's right.
Yeah, we
2020.
We dropped out of school. We dropped out of school to do all this. So we met at the University of Waterloo, dropped out in like our 3rd year to start this, and then just like then all this happened after that.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, look, let's stop it there. I think we touched. I mean, I have a few questions I was end on, but we touched on failure. We touched on the moment of maybe I'll ask it anyways. Actually, like. Because you could talk about a few moments, like when was the moment where you personally felt like you had reached true product market fit?
That's really hard. Probably maybe even like after we were at like a couple million in revenue and like we had an outage and everyone was just like so fucking mad. That was probably it. But still, I don't know if I would call that product market fit because I always thought it was like this big shiny thing that was like spiritual and whatever. It just became because remember, I was chasing it for like 3-4 years and never had it, right? And so but I think it was clear looking back. It's like, oh yeah, when everything went down and like everyone's businesses went down, it's like, oh yeah, yes, we have product market fit.
And then last question, what would be like your biggest piece of advice to an early stage founder that doesn't yet have product market fit?
Don't think it's a really big thing. I think product market fit can be achieved with like one person and one user. I think it's as easy as that. You can have product market fit immediately with an extremely small market as N of 1. And then you just need to achieve product market fit with 2, and then 4, and then 5, and then 10. I think that's a much better mindset to have than to think it's like off in the distance and like a magical thing that you just don't understand because you're not good enough.
Perfect. Well, Jordan, thanks so much for spending time, dude. It's been great.
Of course. Have a good one, man.
Listen, when you go to like a restaurant, you eat a nice, meal, maybe a fancy one, maybe not. Do you leave a tip? I assume you probably leave a tip. You probably leave a tip 100% of the time. Well, guess what? A review is just like a tip. And I know you haven't been leaving one. So just like the waiter that doesn't get a tip after hours of great service, I'm getting a little frustrated. So take your phone out and leave a review. It helps the show move up rankings. It helps us get better guests. It doesn't just help me. It helps way more founders. Thank you.